Tuambie kwamba mtoni ndogo ndio inamwaga kwa mtoni kubwa.
All right, Wilson Mushora is the fourth gangster on the show tonight. But let's start where we must, because we'll get back to that politics in a moment. But quite some animated session we have had over the last 3 days. Ended today, Linus. Very many legal arguments back and forth. But at the end of the day, what is at issue is whether this highest court in the land will uphold or reject what has been done by the two courts below it.
That's right, and like Chief Justice Martha Koome said today, that the judgment will be issued on notice, so there'll be a notice out there that will tell the parties to go back to court on a date that will be mentioned for the decision to come out. But look, it has been as interesting as the last two lower courts, that's the Court of Appeal and the High Court. This BBI battle has provided an opportunity really for Kenyans to witness just how much quality there is out there in the legal discourse, the courtroom performance. And for me, I really thought it was quite admirable to see yet again this team of the emerging team of young lawyers who are carrying constitutional law, in a very, very honorable way. It doesn't matter which way the court case goes, but you will remember Esther Angawa, you'll remember the likes of Evans Ogola, you'll remember them because of the kind of quality contributions, and even the president of the outgoing president of the
actually yes, yeah,
of the LSK, Harvey. It's worth a mention because look, we're not used to that much reason in this country, and look, if you compare how politicians engage the same topic outside court and how the lawyers have been doing this. Mention also must go to the must be made of the quality of the bench. The Supreme Court, for the first time, with new entrants in Ouko,
yep,
and CJ,
and the CJ herself, yes,
Martha Koome. This is their big moment. So more analysis about them will come after the decision and how they'll reason about how they'll reason around the issues that have been presented before them.
But the bigger picture is, as you say, a very proud moment for the country, to the extent that this shows the region, the world, that there are ways of dealing with the disputes. I mean, people could have fought, people could have insulted each other the way they've been doing at rallies, but this was a very civilized conversation going on. It is about the law, it is about what were the facts and all of these things. And you could see everybody, and you know what is so interesting about it is that everybody seems to be very persuasive. You are almost convinced until the next guy speaks. So sometimes some of us who are not lawyers, you actually do not envy those judges sitting there listening to all of these people. And then at the end of the day, they really have to make a decision. But Francis, this coming in the midst of all the political noise, and obviously even as the politicians run around, they are taking a look at what's happening in the Supreme Court. They're not just looking at it as some passing thing that has no interest, that they have no interest in. Obviously, at the end of the day, they are still interested in hearing what the judges will have to say.
Most definitely, and there's a reason for that. But one step back, looking at the quality of the discourse from the bench, from the bar, you would hope that the political class can borrow something from the legal team, that you don't have to heckle each other. Take your time, listen to what your counterpart on the other end is saying. You will have your opportunity to say as much. So those who have been heckling each other out there and maybe planning young people to go and heckle each other, I think they should borrow a leaf from what is happening in court. And secondly, don't throw stones, throw reason, throw arguments. And that is exactly what we saw in the court of law today, where you're able to persuade each other. Even when you disagree with decorum. And I think this is the kind of a country that we should have. But unfortunately, we exist in two worlds, the ideal world and the political world. So in politics, seems like anything goes, but for a place like the courts, there's that order. Now, back to your question, the political class obviously will be looking at what will be coming out of the Supreme Court, and there's a good reason for that, because the BBI discourse has been with us for the last 3-4 years now. The clamor to amend the Constitution, and some of the proposals that were contained in BBI were tailor-made for this general election. Of course, it seems impossible to have those amendments to the Constitution, even if let's say the court was to rule in one way or another. Time is of essence. But number two, and most fundamental, is that the question of amending the Constitution will continue to be with us even past the August 9th general election. And so I think it's a good opportunity for the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, to tell us with finality how our Constitution that was enacted in 2010 can be amended. What can be amended, what cannot be amended, what is the role of IEBC, what is the quorum of IEBC, what is the function of the president in such a referendum, does the president enjoy immunity? Those are fundamental questions that we will get answers to, and maybe that will shape in future any plans to amend the Constitution.
And Linus, one would say actually that this is literally the biggest case that we have seen, the biggest constitutional case that we've seen, that is running literally the whole gamut of our court system, and many people waiting to hear how the Supreme Court will finally settle these matters, because the truth of the matter is that the BBI case raises extremely fundamental questions that whichever way they rule will stay with us for quite some time to come.
The biggest indeed, and Joe, the most technical as well. Mm-hmm. It's not everyone's subject.
Yeah.
For the first time, you can't hear politicians talking about basic structure. It's too complicated. Yeah. You can't take it to the rallies. Mm-hmm. This is a legal space. It is for legal scholars. It is for good lawyers and good judges. And that has been playing out. I just wanted to listen a bit to some of the conversations that were taking place in the Supreme Court. Then I'll come back.
No one would deny that the office of a head of state is an exacting office. And if it were that it was allowed for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to file suits against the president, it would distract him from performing the more important duties for running the state.
IEBC was always properly constituted. It had the quorum mandated by the Constitution itself. And there can be no higher law than the Constitution itself.
The president is not the king. The president of Kenya is not a pharaoh. The president is a servant of the people of Kenya. He exercises delegate executive power, and he must be brought to check if he veers off.
And we cried to the court and said, please build a wall around our Constitution. And build a wall they did. The High Court built a big, beautiful wall, which the Court of Appeal not only accepted as a great mechanism for our Constitution, but went ahead to paint and set up surveillance systems around that wall. All I ask the Supreme Court is that may you find it to be the right thing to do under Article 3 to commission that wall.
Joe, I don't think there's been such a rigorous analysis of the Constitution in recent times. It's such a good analysis, even on basic issues such as the immunity of the president or lack of. That has been discussed here. And there is also the whole question of the process of making the Constitution. This is the first time it has been reviewed in such great detail. We are now, and from the High Court to the Court of Appeal and now to the Supreme Court, we've been reminded how we actually walked the journey of making the Constitution and how that is relevant to the decisions that will then be made about that Constitution.
Very, very interesting, because if you think about it, the Constitution has really not been tested to this degree since it was enacted in 2010. I mean, there was an attempt to change it. There was, I think, it was Okoa Kenya, I think that's what it was called. Then there was the one by
Punguza
Mzigo by Third Way Alliance. And neither of those really, I mean, the Okoa Kenya died at the verification stage, and Punguza, I think, went a little bit to the stage of the county assemblies, if I'm not wrong. And therefore, it never got to the courts where we could actually hear people raise such substantive fundamental questions. But Linus, Francis, you mentioned something about the politics. We saw the last time around when the courts pronounced themselves, whether it was the High Court or whether it was the Court of Appeal, the politicians basically stringed the story to fit their narrative. I mean, there was the DP side that sort of saw this as a vindication of what they had been saying, and then there was the president and the Raila side who said, basically, who fell back on this idea that, you know, the people can change whatever they want, and actually it has featured quite a bit in the campaigns that, oh, you know, if we take over, we will revive this thing. To what degree do you think the politicians would want to talk about this when it is over and try to string it in their favor in whichever way in their ongoing campaigns?
Whichever way it goes will be fodder for politics and for the political class. Why do I say so? If the judges uphold the judgment of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, it will be a hat-trick of losses for the BBI team, which will also be a loss for the handshake team, the president and his handshake partner, ODM leader Raila Odinga. On the other hand, if the Supreme Court was to rule in favor of the appellants, in this case, the BBI Secretariat, IEBC, and so on and so forth, then it will be, you know, a triumph at the highest court in the land, which will negate essentially whatever will have happened at the High Court and the Court of Appeal. So that's where the stakes are high. And it will be fodder for political campaign, because you can imagine if, let's say, the Supreme Court judges agree with what the High Court judges said and what the Court of Appeal judges said. I'm sure the Deputy President would say, see, I told you. On the other hand, if the judges were to rule in favor of what the petitioners are saying, it would be also an opportunity for them to say, see,